Welcome back to another episode of We Don't Know What to Watch, the podcast where two guys use the magic of the internet to watch random movies and kind of see what comes up. Today, with me, in this episode and in every episode, is the Barbra Streisand to my Judy Garland, Kyle Mulford. And I'm Noah Saturn.
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
What's up, Kyle?
Movies.
Yes.
Always.
Are you a funny girl?
I am.
Okay.
So funny.
Mm-hmm.
Hysterical. What did we watch today?
We watched the first of many.
A Star is Born.
A Star is Born.
All right, before we get into that.
From 1937. Not the one from 1953, or it's 3 or 4, 1950, or the from 1976, or the one from 2018.
Yes. 54.
54, okay.
But before we get into that one, what you watching? Do you have anything you've watched in the last 2 weeks?
I probably watched a few things, but I forgot them by now, because I don't write them down religiously like you do.
I am totally OCD, and that means you have to put up with me going through my list of movies.
Okay, and I can make a thoughtful/unthoughtful commentary.
First up, I watched Smiley Face with Anna Faris playing a pothead for an hour and a half and making really bad decisions. Skip it.
Good, huh?
This is coming from a fan of Anna Faris. I just did not like this movie. It was just bad. I watched A Vigilante with Olivia Wilde, and that was pretty good. Did I talk about that one last week? No, I don't think I did.
I don't know.
Who knows? If I'm repeating, then just fast forward. That one was a girl who got beat up by her boyfriend, and so she's going to these meetings, and then she becomes a vigilante who, is this person that they could call anonymously and say, hey, my boyfriend's doing this and this to me, and she goes and beats him up and gets them to leave. So there wasn't a lot to it, but...
Is she friends with 4 mutant turtles that live in the sewer?
Yes, and a rat, and a giant rat.
And a guy with a hockey mask?
Jose Canseco, tell me you didn't pay money for this. And then we were talking about last time, or on one of our episodes, about now I can't even anthology movies.
Yes.
The word anthology escaped me.
Anthology.
And I watched another one because we're recording this. We record earlier, a few weeks earlier than we post, and so it is the middle of October right now. So a few horror movies, but
spooky.
I watched Cat's Eye, and that's the one everybody always remembers for James Woods, or James Wood? James Woods. James Woods. And the smoking segment, Quitters Incorporated or something like that. Quitters Inc. And
that's the one where he puts VHS tapes in his chest, right?
No. This is not Videodrome.
Oh.
No, it's where...
Long live the new flesh.
His segment is he's trying to quit smoking, so he goes to Quitters Inc., where they're very extreme. And they just follow him everywhere, even they're in his house. And if he lights up a cigarette, they shock his wife. And then the next time is I think after a couple of times, they come and rape his wife if he's still smoking. So that's how they get him to...
Seems a tad extreme. I thought they were just going to slap him or something.
But no, then the other segments were actually pretty good too. So that's another anthology I would recommend.
Nice.
I watched Glass, and I thought that finished off the trilogy fairly well. I saw a lot of reviews and heard a lot of people talking about whether they didn't like the ending or not, and I kind of like that he went where he went with it. So that's all I'll say about that because I don't want to spoil it. But I personally thought that it was a nice cap to the trilogy.
Cool. I didn't see it, and I don't really have any plans to see it.
Oh, have you not seen the first two?
I saw Unbreakable, thought it was fine.
Oh, see, I really dig Unbreakable. I really like that movie. I watched The Fog for the first time, actually. I've seen a lot of...
1970s Fog, not the remake?
1980.
1980, okay.
But I've seen a lot of Carpenter's films multiple times. They Live, Escape from New York, Halloween, all of those multiple times, but I'd never seen The Fog all the way through. And it's a pretty creepy movie. It's not one of his best movies, but the atmosphere is really good. It's really creepy, and it's a cool little ghost story. So I would highly recommend that one. I watched a movie on Netflix, a Scott Adkins movie called Avengement. And if you know who Scott Adkins is and you like his action movies, watch this one. That's all I'll say. If you know who Scott Adkins is, then and you like his movies generally, then I will say you will like this one. I also watched another Western on Netflix called The Outsider. And
was he outside?
Yeah. And honestly, I don't remember much about it. It was a little slow, and I was kind of falling asleep. So
that is a ringing endorsement. Put that on the poster.
Ringing endorsement. Ring-a-ding-ding. I've been going through the Final Destination series, and I've already watched the first 3, so I got to the 4th one, The Final Destination.
Oh, okay. This is different now.
Yeah, it's not Final Destination.
Oh, it's like it suffers from Fast and Furious syndrome, where they name one of them The Fast and the Furious, and you can never remember which one it is.
And honestly,
and the next one is Tokyo Drift.
Yes, it's like the others. There's an accident at the beginning, they avoid it, and death comes after them. If you like the first one and the second one and the third one, you'll like the 4th one. It's just fun.
Is this the one with a roller coaster? Or is it...
That was the 3rd one.
Right. I just remember seeing that poster.
This one was a race car.
Oh, okay.
Explosion. I watched a movie called The Mustang, which was interesting because it was about
a car or horse?
Horses.
A horse that turns into a car.
I think it was a fictional story, but it was based on a program that they have in the southwestern states where they take wild Mustangs and they round them up, and then they take them to the prisons and have the prisoners train those horses. So it's a rehabilitation for the prisoners, and then it's also training for the horses. So then they auction them off, and they auction them off to
the prisoners.
Both.
Oh dear.
They come with the horse. You know, they learn how to ride them. So
I heard good things about that one.
Yeah, it was a really nice little story, and a guy, he did a bad thing, but it was a good rehabilitation story, and it was interesting to see this program that they have down there. I watched another anthology movie called Tales of Halloween, and this one had like 9 or 10 different stories in it, and all of them were good.
That's pretty rare for an anthology film. So.
Yeah, to varying degrees, but
so congrats to the filmmakers.
And I think it was a different director for each segment.
Nice.
And then in between there was like radio banter, a DJ talking about like, oh, let's go to this section of the town or whatever, because it all takes place on the same night. So like you'll see trick-or-treaters from one going into the other, kind of like the movie Trick or Treat.
Nice.
And the radio host is Adrienne Barbeau, and I wouldn't have gotten that reference if I hadn't just watched The Fog for the first time.
Nice.
So that was kind of coincidental, but Tales of Halloween might actually go on my yearly October watch list.
All right.
And then one final one I watched was a movie called Ticks.
Starring Patrick Warburton or Peter Serafinowicz.
That would be cool, but no. This is from 1993, a 1993 horror film starring Seth Green, Alfonso Ribeiro, and Clint Howard.
Such a weird combination.
I mean, there's other people in it too, but like those were the 3 names I knew. And it's just a bunch of inner city kids.
Did Alfonso Ribeiro dance?
I don't think he did. He turned into spoiler, he turned into a giant tick at the end.
Did he have a friend Arthur?
Yes. No.
This movie disappoints on so many levels.
I'm going to say that it was very unnatural the way the things moved. I don't know how they did it, but the fact that these ticks were the size of people's heads, the movie was effectively creepy to me because ticks are already a creepy creature, and when you make them that big, I was like,
that's a lot of Lyme disease.
The practical, they actually had the practical ticks made because it's
tick puppets or whatever.
Yeah, it was 1993, so it wasn't CGI. So these things looked creepy, and I was creeped out the whole movie. So I'd actually kind of recommend it.
I'd be interesting to see what a production photo would look like of them just sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
I always kind of love it when you find these weird puppets or other things in the movies, and then you look at them years later and you just kind of see what's left of them, and just oh, this is how it is, this is how it operates.
Yeah. And so I watched a lot of stuff there, and I think if I'm going to give 1 or 2 recommendations that you should really watch off of that list, one, when Halloween comes around again, because it's a little late now, watch Tales of Halloween. And then also, if you like Unbreakable and Split, give Glass a chance. Like I said, I saw mixed reviews on the ending, but I liked where he went with it. And then, of course, if you're a Scott Adkins fan, go on Netflix and watch Avengement. It's Although it's not for the squeamish. There are parts where you see
so
someone
it's a gooey action movie.
Get curb stomped, only it was on like stairs.
Nice.
And it actually shows the teeth getting ripped out.
That's cool.
And every time someone got hit, it was just globs of blood would splatter on the wall.
Very gooey.
Very gooey. I think it was more blood than they needed, but, effect.
I do enjoy some good fake blood effects.
You get to see someone's head get blown clean off.
Nice.
So, yeah, those are my...
So it doesn't quite go to Dead Alive levels, but it's on its way there.
It's on its way. For an action movie, it did pretty good with the amount of blood in there.
Nice.
Those are my recommendations. So, on with the show. A Star is Born.
Director William A. Wellman is guiding Janet Gaynor and Frederick March as they will appear in the David O. Selznick Technicolor production, A Star is Born.
Starring Judy Garland. No. Lady Gaga. No. Barbara Streisand.
No.
Janet Gaynor.
Yes.
Which I don't really know her from much.
She had a nice career. She worked in silent films for a long time too.
She actually won the first Best Actress award given out.
Because back then it was given for like a whole body of work. So it had stuff she'd done the year before and the year of, which I believe was
1928 for the 1927 film Seventh Heaven.
And Sunrise as well, I believe.
That must have been later. Apparently, actually, the Oscar that they use for the movie A Star is Born is her Oscar from Seventh Heaven.
Nice.
Save money on props there.
Gotta do it.
We also
recommend Sunrise as a silent film. It's from F.W. Murnau, a.k.a.
director of
Mr. Nosferatu himself.
Okay. I'll have to check it out. I really like Nosferatu.
Nosferatu is fun, and this one it's more of a romance. It's very playful.
That'd be interesting.
So it's interesting. It's fun to see him working in a different genre, but I think he's probably got more money to play with here, so he's willing to move the camera, do stuff, and it's kind of pretty groundbreaking for the time.
Interesting. Then we also have Frederick March, who, I know him from Ruben Mamoulian's 1930s Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Apparently he did his own makeup for that one.
Did he? I did not know that. But yeah, I would recommend that one.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I really like the transformation sequences in that one.
He's been in a few other movies. I think he was in The Best Years of Our Lives, maybe.
Yeah, he's had a long career. He had a long career doing all tons of stuff. I've seen him in comedy. We've seen him in more serious ones. So, good stuff.
Directed by William A. Wellman. Kind of looked up his filmography. Didn't really know his stuff. It was produced by David O. Selznick, and that's a name. If you watch movies from the 30s, I swear I looked on his IMDb, and he produced like 100 movies in 1933 alone.
That guy was a super producer, and he did meth.
He
stay awake and keep working.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got just the 30s alone, he's got just tons and tons and tons of producing credits.
Yeah, he's definitely a super producer.
Yeah.
And if you had to pick one signature film, it's going to be Gone with the Wind.
Yep. This one was they originally approached George Cukor. Mm-hmm. I can never pronounce his last name.
Yeah, good director.
And he turned it down because it was too much the storyline was too similar to a 1932 movie called What Price Hollywood. But then, ironically, he came around and directed the 1954 musical version. Yes. Which you would think the storyline would be even more similar to a previous movie because it's the same title, too. But,
money talks.
This movie was up for... it won Best Writing for Original Story, and there was a special award for W. Howard Green. I don't know what that was for.
But it was special.
It was special. I posted that. I posted the award, but I didn't actually post behind it
why he won it.
Why he won it.
Oh, man.
It was the first color film to be nominated for Best Picture. It didn't win, but first color film nominated. Yep. It was also up for, but did not win, Best Director for William Wellman, Best Actor for Frederick March, Best Actress for Janet Gaynor, Best Assistant Director for Eric Stacey. Huh. I don't think they give that award anymore.
Maybe they should.
And Best Writing for a Screenplay. So that was, I know they have 2 writing categories now, original and adapted.
Original screenplay and adapted screenplay.
So it's funny that this one was original story. And I'm assuming it got nominated, the newest one got nominated because that was nominated for a bunch too.
Yes.
Which is funny because this one won for original story. So that one probably would have been nominated. The newest one would have been nominated for adapted story.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's it's kind of funny. Just this movie, all of them are well known.
It's the story it's the movie that keeps on giving. There's, it seems like there's one every generation. We skipped the 90s for some reason.
We've had musical, we've had actors, we've had musicians,
kind of rock musicians, and then a bit more modern pop stars.
Yeah. So what's next?
Space.
Astronauts. A Star is Born.
Literally.
Literally. And Go Picture.
I don't know, like YouTube influencers or something.
There you go. A Star is Born, the YouTube edition. I mean, who's an old YouTube star that's kind of like on the downfall right now?
I don't know.
And maybe we can be the stars that are on the rise.
Stop.
All our devoted listeners out there think it's a great idea.
Both of them?
Yes. Both of you. So let's get into this.
Okay.
A Star is Born. Open. Screenplay.
Yeah, it's kind of nice how it sort of starts and ends with looking at the beginning of the screenplay for the film and then the other screenplay. So the text appears on the screen and then we fade into it.
Yeah, and it's actually the actual screenplay, I'm assuming, for the movie. It's got like the open outdoor blah 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 whatever, and then we go into the movie, and I don't know, we're in some mountain town somewhere.
North Dakota.
Was it North Dakota?
Yes.
Couldn't remember.
North Dakota.
North Dakota, eh?
Oh, too far north.
Too far north. Those Canadians got into the Dakotas.
Maybe they're in Fargo.
Oh, yeah, sure, you betcha.
Oh, yeah.
We have a brother and sister who went to the moving pictures.
Yeah.
And they loved it. And
then there's Ma and Pa and...
They were like aunt and uncle or something like that. Like
yeah.
I don't think either one of them was their actual parent. But they never explained that. But then Granny is there, too.
Yeah, Granny's there. Granny is my favorite character, at least in the beginning.
Hey, at the end, too. So.
Yeah, true. Forgot she came back.
The older sister is Esther, and she comes back from the moving pictures. And
Esther Blodgett.
Esther Blodgett. Esther Victoria Blodgett.
Mm-hmm.
And she wants to go to Hollywood and be a movie star. And her aunt and uncle, I think.
Her maybe parents.
Maybe parents, maybe aunt, uncle. Guardians. We'll call them guardians of the galaxy. Star is Born.
Would watch that.
They're like, oh, look at this influence. They just think they can go off to Hollywood and just run off and blah, blah, blah. And,
damn kids these days.
Yeah. And
you should do something more practical, like, marry a farmer and have a bunch of kids. Yeah. That's what you would do in 1937.
Exactly. Go be a housewife.
Until the war starts.
But then later in her bedroom, her granny comes in and says, well, here's some money. You go be a star. But you're going to run into heartbreak on the way.
You got to be prepared for it.
And
eat lightning and crap thunder.
I like that.
This was Burgess Meredith. Was her grandma
as Granny?
Yes.
She's like, I can't take your money, Granny. You saved this up for so long. She goes, no, you can take it, but if you tell anybody about it, I'm going to tell them you robbed me.
Yes, Granny does not care. She goes through her whole story like, listen, I was there with your grandfather. It was hard. So life's going to be hard for you, but in a different way. We worked so hard. We worked the land. Your grandfather died. We buried it, and I kept going. Yeah, like, what are you saving up for? My funeral, I guess.
I'm saving up for a casket. Just bury me in the dirt. Granny takes her to the train station. She goes to L.A., and she finds they show a room for rent ad, and it's $6 a week. Wow. I could stay there for a long, long time.
I could too. But I'm sure it's a lot higher now. I'm sure 1937, $6 was still...
That was a lot of money.
I'm sure it was a bigger chunk of change than it was now.
And so then we go into this whole bit of her going out and seeing the handprints and footprints, and she sees Norman Maine, who she thinks is the best movie star in Hollywood.
The best part is that they were actually very close to her own.
Yeah, and apparently the R from the end of her name is actually on screen, I think.
Nice.
She can't get a job as an extra, and like one of the agencies said, there was a big sign in there that said that her chances are 1 in 100,000 of getting a job as an extra. And she goes back to the hotel apartment. It's not a hotel. It's more
almost
of
like a boarding house.
Yeah. And she runs into Danny McGuire, an assistant director.
Played by Andy Devine, who had a very distinct voice.
And you
Kinda
love him
raspy.
every time he shows up. But
Yep, one of those character actors who had a very long career. He acted up into the 70s, up to his death, so...
Friar Tuck from Robin Hood.
Yep, and he was Cookie in all the Roy Rogers films, and he even showed up in Stagecoach with John Wayne, so...
Yeah, and I just watched that recently, too, so yeah.
Yep, one of those faces and definitely one of those voices, like him and Sterling Holloway, who was the voice of Winnie the Pooh.
Yep.
Very distinct voice.
If you hear, if you don't know the name Andy Devine, if we sent you a clip, you would go, "Oh, that guy."
Yeah, that guy. You probably saw him in something.
So she runs into Mr. McGuire, and she said something about still having $11 left. He goes, "Well, no." He goes, "I want to buy you a drink," and she goes, "I got $11 left." She goes, $11? You're gonna buy me a drink?
So that's kind of this movie has a good amount of humor in it, which I thought was nice.
It felt a lot of the dialogue felt very His Girl Friday, fast-paced kind of witty dialogue, and I really like that kind of dialogue.
It does have so almost a screwball comedy in it in some of the dialogue.
She's been at the boarding house or whatever for a little while, and the hotel clerk you see a point where he's signing a thing that says she's got overdue expenses for so much money, like she hasn't paid for a few weeks, and then you see that she's starting to grow on him because he just rips up that ledger and then goes to the racing pages to make bets. I'll get my money this way.
Yep.
That's a good way to do it, right?
Yep, it's a very stable investment.
And then eventually McGuire gets a job, and they celebrate by going to a concert, and that's where they see Norman Maine.
Big Hollywood movie star Norman Maine, played by Frederick March.
Played by Alec Baldwin. He's drunk and gets assaulted by paparazzi, so he breaks the camera. Wait, he inspired Alec Baldwin, right?
Or Sean Penn.
Or any one of those angry. So they get to see him in all of his drunk glory.
At the Hollywood Bowl, which has been featured in many funny films.
Yes. Apparently Granny's been sending her money because she sends a letter to her and says, "Granny, stop sending me money. I'll be okay." Even though she really won't.
Yeah.
And then Danny says, this was a great bit of dialogue where he comes in and goes, "I got you a job." She's like, "Oh, that's great. As a waitress." But then he goes on to explain that it's a good waitress job because it's at like
a nice hotel for a private party or something.
Yeah, it's like a Hollywood party where there's a bunch of stars and producers and all that stuff. So he's like, "You could go show them what you got." And so she goes and takes this job and starts going into all these.
Well, the best part is I got to have a uniform. It's like, best part about being an assistant director is you get access to the costume department. They just steal like a maid.
It's right next door.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a maid costume for her, and they go to the party, and she starts doing like all these accents while she's giving the hors d'oeuvres. It's like, you'd like an hors d'oeuvre.
She does a Mae West accent, who was a popular comedian at the time. So
yeah, she did a few that were supposed to be different actresses of the time. Yeah. So, but
not bad.
But they were actually really good impressions.
Yeah,
much better than what I just did.
Much better.
So watch this movie and you'll get a much better impression. So there we get introduced to Norman Maine again, and they bump into each other. He's out there ordering a drink, and he's like, "Give me a gin and tonic." And
we also meet sort of the producer, who's kind of one of the other principal characters who we see a lot.
Oh, Oliver, right?
Oliver, yeah. And he was actually probably one of my favorite supporting characters. He's because he was doing his job as a producer, but he did genuinely care about Norman, and he genuinely cares about Esther as well.
You got to wonder, is that really how it works in Hollywood? Do those producers care that much?
I'm sure some of them do.
Yeah, they've got. I mean, look at Roger Corman. He builds careers. That he wants those people to go on and do that stuff. Yeah. But yeah, he was a great side character. And then I don't think we got introduced to Libby yet, though.
We see Libby later. as Libby's kind of the PR man, he always has to make the stars look good because this was part of the Hollywood glamour machine where they knew it was fake, but you kind of wanted anywhere. Every star had an origin story, probably had a different name that sounds better, more screen worthy, and then they come from a different place. And we see that in a later scene. So this was very self-aware that it was happening. People knew it was happening, but they didn't care.
Yeah.
Kind of knew it was fake, but then, they're showing hey, this could be you. Walk off the street, get noticed by someone, become a big star.
Yeah. Yeah, because before that at the party, it was one of those where it's we show Norman Maine drunk and ordering a gin and tonic while he still has a gin and tonic in his hand.
Yep, and it's almost all gin and very little water.
It's just a little splash right at the end. How I used to drink my drinks when I was in college.
I'm sure.
That's why I don't drink anymore.
Because you don't have a liver.
And he's just an awful drunk. But then he starts flirting with Esther, and then his girlfriend comes in, and so he asks for another scotch and soda. That's when he asks while he still has one in his hand, and then he goes and helps Esther with the dishes.
He tries to because he's drunk,
and he drops dishes, and she's like, "Well, I gotta fit." Well, he gets knocked out by his girlfriend because he's back there with another woman, and she's like, well, and he's like, well, let's get out of here, Esther. And she's like, I got to finish the dishes. So he throws them all on the ground. They're done. It's like, don't tell Mom the babysitter's dead.
Exactly.
The dishes are done, man. And so that's their little meet cute. And then he drives her home, and which he probably shouldn't have been. And they part ways.
Yep,
I think he's trying to get with her, but...
And he's charming in his own kind of creepy sort of way, but then he's kind of lovable too.
Yeah, and then he gets the idea in the middle of the night while he's sleeping in his tux with a bottle of champagne.
As you do.
That he's like, I'm going to call the producer and say, this girl's got the right stuff. And the producer's like, oh,
screen test.
Just like all the others, right?
It's like, no, this one's really got something.
So he groggily accepts giving her a screen test just to shut him up.
And then he calls her, and then they've turned this fun brief sequence where, where you see the night watchman or whatever at the hotel. He's kind of, wanders in, answers the phone, wanders all the way up, kind of sneaks to a room, ducks under the light, ducks under the hanging light pole or something, and then goes and says, there's a phone for you. It's 3. Who's calling you at 3 in? Some guy named Norman.
She's like, Norman Maine. Yeah, right.
Whatever. He doesn't care. He's tired.
She goes the next day and she gets the job. And this is the scene where we get Libby. And they're like, what's her name?
No, before that, there's even sort of a punchline where later she goes and everyone goes back to bed. And then as the guys, she wakes up Danny. Danny's like, oh, we got to get you ready and all this stuff. And then, she goes back to bed. The night watchman or whatever is going to go back downstairs. And he hits the light with his head and it breaks.
Yeah. Then
she gets there, goes to the screen test. Then she's get all makeup and everything. And it's
goes well. I like our introduction to Libby because he's asking her questions and finds them all boring. So he just completely alters them.
Where are you from? North Dakota? It's let's see, Colorado. That sounds better.
And raised in the hills.
A small cabin in the Rockies comes the new, what's your name? Esther Blodgett.
Esther Victoria Blodgett.
Esther Victoria. Victoria. Vicky, something. Vicky Esther.
Lester, Pester, Zester.
Vicky Lester. It's then you go to Oliver. Oliver, how's this? Vicky Lester. Oh, I like the sign of that. Then there's Vicky Lester. Vicky Lester. And then
he's like, the people hey, say this name. How does it sound?
Everyone around the office is like, there you go. So then she gets this whole origin story.
Yeah, and then we get the whole training and the changes and all the makeup and stuff.
Has to go through where she's sitting in the makeup chair and they're just putting different shades of lipstick her and she's got 3 or 4 different eyebrows drawn on at the same time.
And then the makeup artist is going, every one that I try, she looks surprised.
They give her the Crawford lips or whatever.
And then we get her in the cafeteria, practicing her lines, and Norman comes in hungover because he orders a raw egg and drinks it.
Yes.
I think he puts Tabasco sauce on it or something
like that.
Another Rocky reference. Only I think he ate. Did you know the story behind Rocky drinking the raw eggs in Rocky?
I did not.
Okay, so Sylvester Stallone, when he first started out, he wanted to make it in Hollywood. He was one of those A Star is Born kind of stories. He wanted to make it really bad, but he couldn't do it until Rocky hit. And he was living in an apartment. So like the apartment he put in Rocky was based on what he actually lived through. And he couldn't afford to keep the heat on in his house. So his stove didn't work. So he ate raw eggs. And that's why he put that in the movie, because it's like he was so poor that he couldn't even cook his eggs because he couldn't get a fire on the stove.
Wow.
And I always grew up thinking it was because it was like some sort of like
protein thing
where like if you eat it raw, like, oh, it's supposed to help with your muscles and all that. No, that he put it in there because that's what he used to do when he was poor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so poor I can't even cook an egg. But sidetrack. They go to the preview. She gets into her first movie with Norman, and they go to the preview. And as everybody's
kind of
leaving,
a test screening, you got to fill out your cards, which is something they still do sometimes, I believe.
Yeah, I've actually been to one of those when I was in college, so that was
cool.
Like 20 years ago now, so that's not really that recent.
Do you remember the movie?
I can't remember what it was called, but I think it was a movie with Samantha Mathis in it, and I don't even think it ever ended up in the theaters, actually.
Maybe it went straight to video.
It might have. Yeah, so either that or it was never released. I don't know.
Must have really stuck with you then.
But yeah, it was a pre-screening where they had us fill out the cards with suggestions and everything.
Cool.
But yeah, they go there, and as everyone's leaving, they're all like, "Oh, that Vicky Lester was great. She's the next big star." Blah blah blah, and people are going, "Well, how about Norman Maine? Oh, he was in it too." So like they're showing he's on the decline,
mm-hmm.
which I think is funny. I'm going, you didn't notice that. I mean, even if you're on the decline, you're not going to walk out of there going, "Oh, I didn't even notice he was in the movie when he was the lead
main character." Yeah.
I mean, but I think it was just trying to emphasize that
mm-hmm.
he's kind of on the fall, and then they really hyped her up and they didn't want to run into everybody, so they snuck out the back and
yep.
And she says something, and he goes, "Well, this is life. A Star is Born." So we gotta get the title in there.
Yep, and you'll never guess what happens next unless you've seen the 3 other versions of this film.
They go to a boxing match?
Yes.
And
they get
proposes?
together. They decide to get married. They get married. The press try to avoid the press agent, at least in this one.
Yeah, they're dodging Libby. And he's getting all ticked off at him. Libby genuinely doesn't like Norman.
He hates his guts.
And it's a great dynamic between him
mm-hmm.
and Norman, especially at the end when they talk together. But yeah, they go, "We're going to go elope." And Libby has other plans because he's like, "Don't worry about it. I'll plan everything. And I'll get all
the biggest elopement this town has ever seen."
And then we cut to them in a courthouse.
They sneak off to get married in the courthouse. Danny
and a bunch of inmates are the witnesses for their wedding. And we find out his real name is Alfred Hinkle.
Yes.
Then they go on their honeymoon, and it's in a little camper, and they get stuck. And I like that scene where it's they get stuck and a car's passing by, and they're like, "I can't help you." And he's like, "Do you know who I am? I'm Norman
I'm
Maine."
Norman Maine.
And the guy goes, "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so." And it's
he just drives off.
And he drives off. He's like, "I don't care. I don't know who you are."
It's like an old Model T or something.
Yeah. It's like some old mountaineer or something, or farmer that never owned a TV.
Well, TVs weren't invented till the 40s, so nobody owned one back then in 1937.
Well, that's probably true. Never went to the movies.
Never went to the movies there.
Yeah, so their honeymoon doesn't seem that successful, but I think
they have a good time.
They have a good time, and
the real honeymoon was the friends they made along the way.
Then they go to one of their houses they own.
Yep.
And Libby comes out and he's like, "I can't get PR for Norman anymore." And at the house, the producer, this is where the producer comes in, and he's like, "Your movie did well, and Vicky's on the rise." And Norman's like, "Well, how did I do it?" And he goes, "Well, can you handle it?" And he goes, Am I slipping? Am I slipping? And he goes, "Well, that's the wrong tense. You've slipped."
Yep, so he's kind of out of it, and then Oliver offers to buy him out of his contract, because back then there was the big studio system where they would have these contract players.
Yeah, and which they still do to this day, because, I mean, if you look at the Marvel universe. Like a lot of those people are on contract to do so many movies in the Marvel.
Yeah, but it's definitely nowhere near as prevalent. That's
No, because
pretty rare.
The studio would basically own you. Whereas like the Marvel example is, I think they're on a contract to do so many movies, but they can go off and do.
You can do whatever you want in between.
Yeah.
Time, if anything, the Marvel movies can be a sweet deal for some actors because then all right, I got a steady paycheck for a while, and then once you're done with that,
if you do well in one of those movies, people are like, oh,
and at this point they're making like $1 billion on the regular, which is just what they do now.
And back then in the 30s and 40s, like the studios literally owned
everything. Like, look,
like if you think about Judy,
they control your diet. Judy Garland was terribly abused.
She was forced to get abortions and stuff like that, and like they controlled your life.
They would give you drugs, to like keep you going for like 18-hour work days. Then they'd put you down with more drugs. They'd put you on certain diets. It
was not as glamorous as it might have seemed.
It was bad.
Might have been good for the producers and directors, but
I'm sure it was great for the studio heads.
Yeah, but those actors, boy, they were owned.
Mm-hmm.
We get a little bit of montage of his decline and her rise. Like the mail room where he's got less letters and hers are just like letter, and then just different little things showing how he's falling and she's rising. And then we get a package at the door. Finally, there's a day when he's home alone, and because he's not doing in movies anymore, and a package comes to the door, and the package man is like, are you Mr. Lester?
And he just goes, how dare I take my wife's name instead of mine? And then he gets like a call from a gossip columnist. He's like, yeah, can you tell your wife that I want to talk to her? He's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And then eventually her rise comes to her getting an Oscar. And
he can't handle it, so then he gets drunk and makes a grumpy speech.
Yeah. And just, these awards don't mean nothing. I have one too, and now you're just throwing me away. So basically,
I want an award for the worst performance of the year.
So he wanted a Razzie before
he
Razzies
wanted a
existed.
Razzie, yes.
And so that was after he quit drinking. So then he got, he ended up drinking again, and so he ended up going to a sanitarium to try and stop.
Goes to rehab, gets out of rehab, tries to get a new part, turn over a new leaf, doesn't quite work. Tries to spend his time himself, and then
he has a social secretary at the sanitarium named Cuddles.
Yeah, that's his nickname. It's basically got to keep him from drinking or something.
Yeah, Oliver came into the sanitarium and offers him a small part, and he's like, "No, I got other offers," because he doesn't want just a minor part.
Mm-hmm. He still wants to keep some sort of dignity.
Yeah. And then Norman goes to the racetrack and gets in a fight with Libby at the bar because Libby's like, I don't like you. I've never liked you. And he was actually clean. Like Norman was clean. And then when Libby broke him down, they got into a fist fight, and then he ordered a drink and he's back off the wagon again.
Mm-hmm.
On the way.
He fell off the wagon.
Fell off the wagon. So I don't know. Something about a wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends up missing for like 4 days because Vicky's
goes on a
pacing
bender.
the house.
Has a lost weekend.
And then they go to the courthouse because they finally found him, and he gets reprimanded by the judge and sentenced to 90 days. And then Vicky says, I'll assume responsibility for him. And so the judge is like, okay.
Turn him loose.
Well, let him go.
And of course they don't want him to know that they went to court because that'd be terrible PR.
Yeah. She says she'll quit the pictures to go away with him. And he's like, no, you can't do that. This is what you wanted and all that. And he says, I'm going to go for a swim. And
he can't stand the fact that she'd be willing to give up her care for him. So then he's going to be like, okay, I'm going to go swim and I'm going to go die.
Yeah, I'm going to go swim too far.
Yep. And then we get a scene of Libby talking to a bartender after his Norman's death, reading about it in the paper. It was the first drink of water he ever had. Then he makes the bartender laugh. It's like, sheesh, this guy really did not care for Norman at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had written down Libby was making jokes about the guy's death.
Like, sheesh.
And Vicky gets ambushed at the funeral by paparazzi. And then so she still decides she's going to quit. She's like packing up her boxes at home and is like, which is like, well, she was going to quit. So the guy committed suicide. Now she's still going to quit anyway.
Yeah, because now she's in grief. She doesn't know what to do. She's tired of everything.
And Granny comes in and reminds her, hey, because she sent a letter home, said, I'm coming home. And Granny just bolted out there and shows up on her doorstep and says, "I told you there's going to be heartache. You got to take the heartache and stick with it.
Yeah.
I gave you all that money. Don't squander it."
Thanks, Granny, as I stay in my third house.
Although she was rich enough, she could have just paid Granny back, I guess.
She probably could have paid Granny back several times over.
And then bought a new house for her aunt and uncle.
Mm-hmm.
But Granny talks her into staying in the pictures because she knows that ultimately that's what would make her happy.
Mm-hmm.
So then they go to a big premiere at the end.
And she introduces herself as Mrs. Norman Maine.
And this was a line that was later added. It was not in the original script. There was a bunch of different, there was a couple different lines they tried. And then I don't remember who was it that wrote this line. And now it's like apparently like number 52 on the top 100 movie lines or something like that. So hello, everybody. This is Mrs. Norman Maine.
And they use that same line in the 1954 version. And then she hyphenates in the 1976 version. And then she introduces herself as Allie Maine because in the 2018 version, they just don't give her a last name, so she doesn't have to hyphenate.
So we have that line, and then we end the same way we began, this time with the last page of the script. And so I kind of like that they bookended it with the script just because it was all about Hollywood and making it in there and just kind of becoming a star.
So it is kind of an interesting look and almost a somewhat self-reflective look at what the Hollywood system was like. So if you're interested in that, I'd say I'd recommend. But yeah, it's stick around for a reason. The plot, they keep using the plot for a reason because it works.
Yeah. So overall, what'd you think?
I thought it would have been better if they were in Vegas and it had Elizabeth Berkley and it was actually Showgirls. No, I've never seen Showgirls, though they've heard it's so bad it's good. But
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it stuck around for a reason. I've seen all the versions of it except the 76 version, so.
Apparently you don't need to, because I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes and it's like this version is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. The 54 version is in like the 80s or 90s. The 2018 is like 90 some percent. And the Barbra Streisand, Chris Christopherson 70s version is like 36%.
Sheesh. I'm sure it stuck around for a reason though. People still remember it.
But I'm going to say overall, I really dug this movie because I really liked the dialogue. And like you said, the story's been around for a reason. It's a good story and great side characters with the producer and then that assistant director played by Andy Devine. And Libby was even like a great antagonist to Norman Maine. Mm-hmm. And the two stars were actually really good. So, I really recommend this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely... In this one, it's kind of interesting if you notice how the plot can shift a little bit depending on the time it's made. This one, it's almost all about her. She's got a backstory. She's got everything. And then Norman's just kind of there. We don't learn anything about him. He's just kind of a grumpy, full of himself guy, but still charming. And then in the 1950s version, we learn a little bit more about him and his childhood. In 1970s, you learn even more. And then you could arguably say that in the 2018 movie, it's more about him, Jackson Maine this time, because you learn more about him. He has a whole new character in his brother, played by Sam Elliott.
Yeah, he's got a lot more backstory.
You almost argue that then it's more about him than it is about her.
Yeah. What is your... I think we both give this an endorsement, and I highly recommend this. And what did we watch this on? I think this is on a couple different places.
I watched this on Amazon Prime.
I did as well.
I believe it's also on Tubi.
Yeah, so if you don't have Amazon Prime, Tubi is free.
But Tubi does have ads.
Tubi has commercials, but yeah, if you have Amazon Prime, it's on there. What is your recommendation for a double feature?
My double feature is The Player from 1992, I believe.
Ah.
So this one's fun because it's almost sometimes referred to as it's a big Hollywood in-joke. So it's still about the movie making process, where we've got Tim Robbins playing the head of story, and then he starts getting death threats from like a screenwriter. He doesn't know which one because he's rejected so many people. He thinks he finds the guy. He accidentally kills the guy, and then he has to cover it up, and he's not even sure if he killed the right screenwriter. But because it takes place in Hollywood of the early 90s, there's a bunch of, subplots. You see there's like star cameos of just about every famous person around town shows up in this movie at one point in kind of small bit parts. So that's really funny to see all these people going through. And then there's even this ongoing subplot of he's like, you see every once in a while a director shows up, played by Charles something, I forget the actor's name, but you'd recognize him if you saw him. So he shows up every once in a while, and then he goes like, all right, I want this kind of movie, I want this kind of movie, I don't want it to be a happy ending. And then, by the end of the movie, you actually see a test screen of what that movie you want. I don't want it to be big stars, I want this to be real. And then by the very end of the movie, you see it has a happy ending, and it has 2 big stars and cameo roles. It actually had like Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis at the time just show up for this fake movie that's really funny. So I definitely recommend The Player.
That's an Altman film, right?
That is Robert Altman. So he liked working a lot with a big cast and sort of tons of little stories.
I'm going to do one that it's going to sound like a cop-out, but there's a reason for it. I'm actually going to recommend the 2018 A Star is Born.
You son of...
Only because this is a case where, there's the other 2 versions. I haven't seen the other versions, so I don't know if they're good or not. But this is one of those cases where a remake works, and this is how you do it. You take the basic story plot, but then you kind of alter other things. Like you said, he gets a bigger subplot with his brother. She's lesser of a character, but it's still his fall and her rise.
And there's a parallel because now she has to change her hair, get backup dancers, change her musical style to be more poppy than what it was.
Yeah. But I recommend it because just as a reminder to some people, including myself, that when they say they're going to remake a classic, it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. I mean, A Star is Born, the other versions never went away. They've always been known. They've always been out there.
If someone remakes a movie you like, it's not going to go away anytime. They're not going to it's not like someone's going to come into your house and like wreck your Blu-ray copy of the original movie or something.
And I'm also guilty of hating it when they do remakes for certain movies. And although I will say right now, I do not like they're making a remake of Princess Bride.
I'm not sure if that one's going to even get off the ground.
There are some that just... There are some movies that, like... I think it's a certain confluence of events that just made the movie perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily even the story, although it was William Goldman that wrote it.
Yes.
But
he also wrote the novel. So
I think
if you haven't read the novel, I'd recommend that as well. It's a lot of fun.
The way everything fell together with that movie is just like... I don't think you could have that same...
It was definitely a lightning in a bottle situation.
Yeah, but there's been a lot of movies where the original and the new one are good, and this is one of those cases. A lot of time with horror movies. The Fly with Vincent Price, great movie. The Fly with
Jeff Goldblum,
great movie. John Carpenter was good at this, but that was Cronenberg, but then Carpenter also did The Thing from Another Planet or Thing from Outer Space.
The Thing from Another World, based on a short story, Who Goes There, by I think John W. Campbell.
But The Thing from Another World, great movie. And then The Thing, great movie. The third thing, never even watched it because it didn't even look good.
It was a real shame, though, because they even did have a lot of practical effects in the movie, but then they ended up not using them for some reason.
But yeah, some remakes can be good, and this is one of those where, the third remake of it ended up getting a bunch of Oscar nominations.
Well, yeah, and then even Alfred Hitchcock would remake his own movies sometimes. It's like The Man Who Knew Too Much.
And then there's a lot of cases of who is the one, the guy
Ben Hur, the 1955 Ben Hur is a remake from 1928.
The guy who directed Funny Games directed an American version of his own movie. So, which I thought was great because usually if there's a really great foreign film, some American will like remake it and just Americanize it and like it'll be crap. So he remade his own film, and actually his own remake is really good too.
Nice.
But those are our recommendations.
Remakes, they're like anything else. They can be good, they can be bad. So even something which you think would be impossible to remake and turn out pretty well. I know a lot of people like the 2000s version of Dawn of the Dead, as opposed to, because the 1978 version we all can agree is pretty good.
Yes.
It was 2004, 2005, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And also, it's Zack Snyder, who a lot of people can't even stand anymore, but even the people who don't like Zack Snyder are like, Dawn of the Dead was pretty good.
The thing about Zack Snyder is that I admire him because he's always willing to take a big swing.
Yeah, and he's
Even if he
very
misses,
visual.
I'd rather have someone take a big swing than someone who can doesn't even try.
Yeah, because I'm actually a fan of some of his. I really like The Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
And certain aspects of some of his other movies. Because he directed Man of Steel, right?
Yes.
I actually am one of those people that loves Man of Steel.
All right, good for you.
I know that's not a popular opinion, but I love Man of Steel. I think it's a great movie. But that's beside the point. Anyway, those are our recommendations, and watch them all.
Yep.
Why don't we go to the wheel?
To the wheel. Spin the wheel.
All genres?
Sure. We could get something good.
70% or higher, and spin. Oh, that's a documentary. We don't do
We don't do documentaries. Spin, 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 spin.
All
spin.
genres and spin. Okay, more info. I'm going to read you the description. It's 89% on Rotten Tomatoes from 1959.
Okay. A Star is Born?
Yeah. No, that was 54. Young lovers Orfeu and Eurydice run through the favelas of, I can't even read this, of Rio during Carnival. On the lam from a
What is it?
hitman.
It's Black Narcissus?
On the lam from a hitman dressed like death and Orpheus
Orpheus.
vengeful.
Person.
It doesn't say Orpheus, it's Orfeu.
Yeah, cool.
Orpheo's vengeful fiancée Mira, and passing between moments of fantasy and stark reality. This impressionistic retelling of the Greek legend of Orpheus and Eurydice introduced bossa nova to the world with its soundtrack by young Brazilian composer Luis Bonfa and Antonio Carlos Jobim.
Yes.
This movie is called Black Orpheus.
All right, Black Narcissus is a different movie.
Yes. 1959. I've never seen this one before. I've heard of it.
Solid.
And you can find this on the Criterion Channel, which is not one we have, but you can find it there, or Canopy. So another Canopy film.
Nice. Canopy is great because it's free. Thanks to your pal at the library, or if you're one of those weirdos who wants a physical copy, I'm sure you could find it at the library. A lot of libraries keep a lot of good Criterion movies around, so.
Yeah. So join us next time for go check out Black Orpheus, and we'll talk about that next time.
And also, we're going to post a link to a video just in the description about a great video by the channel Be Kind Rewind that compares all 4 versions of A Star is Born. It's really fascinating, tells you just kind of the basics and differences between them. Really good overview that I watched before recording this, just because it just gives you a lot of great information about 18 minutes.
And now I have to remember to put that in the description.
I'm sure you'll get it when you're editing this.
Yes, I will. I will. Then you can find us on Twitter, AwesomeKM.
And I'm at Noah_Saturn.
And you find us on Instagram at We Don't Know What to Watch. And that's about it.
That's about it.
Hit that, smash that like button.
Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Either way, it boosts us in the magic algorithm or whatever.
Yeah, boost us.
One of these days, we'll get it on more platforms than just the YouTubes.
Yes, get those views in and thumbs up and all that stuff, and we'll start expanding from there.
Yes.
But until next time,
Hollywood. Copyright claim.
And scene.